Are you interested in selling your home, but are concerned about the costs that may come up when you sell your home? Today I'm going to tell you about 7 costs that you may not realize when selling your home. Hi, I'm Laura Clute with Ozark Gateway Realty, and I help lakefront homeowners in Cherokee Village sell their homes who are also animal owners. So today we're going to talk about fees that a seller pays when they sell their home. So obviously the first one and the most expensive is the real estate commission. But keep in mind, even though it is the largest cost, you may be losing money by not hiring a realtor. They can often get you more money and help you with the negotiations with the buyer. And even if sometimes you sell it as for sale by owner, the buyer may still ask you to pay their realtor's commission. So you may still be out it even if you don't use a listing agent. And why would you not want to use a listing agent to have someone representing your interests in the transaction? In my previous video, I talked about ways to sell your home faster, and obviously these things are going to cost you money. Cleaning, staging, repairs, landscaping, painting, inspection, repairs during the process from the inspection. All of those things are going to cost you. Obviously you don't have to do any of those things, so it depends on how much money you wanted to put into selling your home. Another cost that you're going to be looking at is, as I mentioned before, buyer's cost. If the buyer asks you to pay for their costs during the transaction, some of them, depending on the type of loan that they have, there can be a restriction on how much the seller can pay or others people can pay of the buyer's closing costs. It can be anywhere from 1%. I believe the cap on FHA and RD and VA loans is 6% of the loan. So at a $100,000 house, that's $6,000 right there that you may be paying of the buyer's closing costs. And of course, buyer has closing costs, you have closing costs. Those are things that just happen to make sure that the property is transferred legally. You're going to pay a fee to the title company to do all the paperwork. You're going to pay a lawyer to prepare the deed. Somebody at the title company also has to do the title search, and the state will require what's called deed stamps or a transfer tax. In Arkansas, in our area, it's $3.30 per thousand, and that's usually split 50-50 with the buyer and seller. So that is a shared cost. Of course, you also had taxes. Now, you may have already paid your tax bill this year, but you'll still have prorated taxes from the first of the year all the way to the closing date. So if that's one day on January 2nd or a whole calendar year on December 31st, you're still going to have prorated taxes no matter when you close. And then if you're in Cherokee Village, you'll have prorated county taxes as well as prorated SID taxes. Currently, SID taxes are paid ahead and county taxes are paid in arrears, which makes it all the more complicated. Some other closing costs a seller might pay is if you own a townhouse, then there would be a property owners association fee that will also be prorated because that's usually paid on an annual basis. You can also pay it monthly. So either way, the townhouse fees will have to be paid. Another closing cost paid by the seller is usually a termite policy. Termites are pretty common in our area, and I would highly recommend a buyer get a termite policy. And some loans require them. There's FHA, VA, RD, again, all of those are more than likely going to require a termite policy so that the lender is protecting their investment instead of it crumbling in after the termites eat all the wood. And so that would be another cost to the seller. If there is a clearance letter or if they already have a policy in place, then it would be less expensive to just transfer it to the new buyer. So, and then those are most of the seller costs that you're going to be looking at closing that the title company would take care of. Another thing that will show up on when you go to the title company would be any payoffs that you have. Of course, the first payoff that most people think of is a mortgage. Hopefully you're lucky enough to not have a mortgage on your home when you go sell it and you can pocket all the funds. But most of the people in the country do have a mortgage. They'll have a payoff, and you just want to keep in mind that it's not your remaining balance that is necessarily what's going to be taken out, because it'll be prorated interest from the day you last made your payment until the day you close. So there will be a little bit more than that. Again, you might have other things that need to be paid off, liens, judgments, credit cards, anything that's tied to you as a person or the property has to be paid off when you close. So there may be other things that you don't expect to come up that will have to paid off. And they have to be paid off and a release filed for it to be a clear title for them to pass. Relocation costs, because obviously you're not going to stay there anymore if the new buyer is moving in. Not only packing up your belongings, possibly a storage building that you're renting while you're listing your house for sale, as well as actually the moving truck. And then of course, any costs, if you're buying a house, any costs that you have to buy that house, you have to keep all that in mind too when you're selling a house, and make sure that you get enough to cover all that. The last cost that I'm going to talk about today in fees a seller pays when selling their home is capital gains. You don't necessarily think of income taxes when you go to sell a home, but the title company will send you documentation after closing that you have to report on your income taxes, and you will. There is a possibility that you would owe capital gains taxes. There's short-term capital gains and there's long-term capital gains. Short-term capital gains is if you owe it less, if you own the home for less than a year, and those taxes are significantly higher. So you want to do everything possible to not sell a home within 1 year. I highly recommend it. Long-term capital gains is less. Neither of them can I tell you what they are, because it depends on your tax rate and how much you make and where you fall in the tax brackets. So it's going to be different for everyone. But the long-term, either short-term or long-term capital gains, if you use that home as your primary residence as 2 out of the last 5 years, you can exempt up to $250,000 as an individual or $500,000 as a married couple from your taxes. So if you and this part that you have to claim on your taxes is an adjusted amount. So you bought the house for $100,000, let's say. You sold the house for $200,000. It's not just $100,000 left over. You could take off your closing costs, any improvements you've made, anything that you cost for the house. So it could be cut down to $50,000 or less. And if it's less than $250,000 or $500,000, like I said, then it's exempt completely. So those are all costs that you would need to consider if you're wanting to know what fees the seller would pay when selling a house. If you've forgotten everything I've said, you can feel free to call or text or email me and just remind you what they are. Thank you for watching.